tell me I'm wrong, Kaepernick more impactful than any athlete since Muhammad Ali?
I don't know if I would say it's Kaepernick, because in order to say that, I would need to hear more from him, and he's been pretty silent, so I can't give that to him. I do think that timing plays a role in all of this, and we're in a time right now where a lot of people are very frustrated and becoming more vocal, which most of the time I think that that's a great thing. And when you see Colin Kaepernick protest, it gives people an outlet and a way to talk about it. So I don't know that Kaepernick is the reason, but that action was, and I think the timing plays a big part in it. And I will also say that before Kaepernick ever did that, you had LeBron and Chris Paul and Dwayne Wade do that speech at the ESPYs. So they were bringing things up like that, too. Not
near the impact of Kaepernick, in my view.
And I agree with that. I think only time will tell, because it all depends on the changes that result from what he's created and what he started. We talked about yesterday, I forget who it was that brought up the fact that we need to have, and Michael Bennett talked about it, that we need to have one white athlete to lock arms, and once that happened, look at how things begin to change. 24 hours later, look at how much things have evolved and how much things have changed. So time will be the biggest test, the biggest thing that lets us know how impactful he's really been, because what he's done is he's opened the door to what these issues are. He's began the conversation. That's one of the things that he said, I want to start the conversation. Everyone says you need to do something beyond the conversation. I think that will come. But you can only begin to do things to the effect that you begin to create a conversation and a dialogue, and he has certainly done that.
I think he did last year, but one, I think some of the missteps were in some of the words he used, right? Like, you call cops murderers, all of a sudden, well, you've lost any sort of support of even the good cops. And then I think we're not seeing any sort of dialogue about it as much this year. It's just, we have problems and we're going to protest about those problems. How can we measure any sort of change? I would agree with you. Chris Long, it's a powerful statement to go like, hey, we're all in this together. We all want equality, especially Chris Long, not just with his ties to the NFL, but also his ties to Charlottesville, having gone to school at UVA. But at some point, if Kaepernick is the guy who started it, there has to be some sort of leadership of Kaepernick. Kaepernick has already actually said, I'm not going to protest anymore, that there has been enough change. How do we measure that change? What exactly was wanted? Like, I think we all would say there's some disturbing things going on in our country, but I'm not really sure there's a focus on how to fix it and who's going to be the one to measure what's being fixed enough so that we don't have to protest
Well, if
anymore.
that was the case, we'd already see some closure and some fixing among the things that we've been talking about. You know, the injustice, the racism, whatever you want to call it, these things have always been there. They've been kind of just lying under.
Always been talked about.
Well, they have been talked about, but not to this point, because you don't know something? From, I believe, 1970 to the present time, most athletes were more concerned about their brand and their money than they were talking about social issues. And now all of a sudden we're having this conversation. Of course it's more talked about and it's more out there, because now they got a platform from which to shout and talk all about all the things that they want to talk about.
Well, he was willing to put his job on the line, and that says more than a lot of other people have done.
Agreed.
Listen, he put his job on the line, I think, inadvertently. I don't think any part of this was planned by Kaepernick. Again, and I do. He's had incredible impact. Again, when you got Chris Long, who his brother's in the NFL, his dad's in the NFL Hall of Fame, he is now joined in this protest. And again, to me, I see it as a gesture that doesn't really mean a lot in terms, because again, I think this symbolic stuff Kaepernick has done has created an amazing conversation about Kaepernick, has brought the racial discussion into sports in an unprecedented fashion. But again, I agree kind of with Doug. What results? Where has it really driven us? Any place new? I don't see it. And again, I think there's a lot of people, I've read a lot of people, oh, it was so great what Chris Long did. And I read somewhere someone said, oh, he just like gave Black America a hug, Chris Long. And I was like, oh, so that's what we needed. We needed a white football player to give us a hug, and now we feel better, and somehow the world is being improved. It's a gesture. And again, Kaepernick's impact, when I say he's had an impact, I don't particularly think it's been a great impact. I think he has elevated the art of gestures and symbols, and we'll see if it results in anything.
I think that if you look close enough, you look at what John Lynch said yesterday, and then how he walked it back today about being divisive or divisive. And then you turn around and you watch Chris Long with his arm around Malcolm Jenkins yesterday, and then less than 24 hours, he comes back and says, I made a mistake in my assertion that this protest stuff is divisive.
But that's actually what he was saying, right? You can't even say it's divisive or divisive. By the way, I think
you don't apologize for things. You never apologize for things that you mean. He made an apology and came back and said, I'm wrong because it's not divisive.
I would agree. Publicly, he made a statement. And the thing, what we should have learned from the last election is a lot of people say a lot of things publicly, and then when they get in a private moment, in a voting booth, or where decisions are actually being made, it may contradict everything they've said publicly. And so we're getting real caught up in gestures and public statements that, to me, I'm not sure if they mean anything at all.
I think look, those of us who sat in a locker room as athletes, like, one of the things that the NFL has always at least appeared to be is a meritocracy, right? Like, you have your job not based upon your race, but based upon how good you are. And look, you lived it more so in the NFL. I just played in college and professionally overseas in basketball, but basketball is different than football, so you can tell me more about it. But I've always thought that there really kind of is no race, at least at the highest level in sports. And so racial discussions have always been a bigger part of the locker room because we can joke about it, we can talk about it. Because at the end of the day, usually the best player plays regardless of what color your skin is, and blending what's happening socially and what's happening, it's weird because so many of us who grew up as athletes didn't necessarily deal with racism. Sometimes with stereotypes, but not as much racism.
We got to move. We'll come back to this discussion a little later in the show.